the wooden grinding mortar in fear of Mother Yashoda. But who has been called from behind by her, who ran after him when with a greater speed to that Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances.
To those super excellent pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna's baby.
Yeah.
Upon seeing his mother profusely cried and rubbed his eyes again and again with his sleeve his hand, his eyes were fearful and his breathing quick, and his mother Yashoda bound his belly with ropes. He shivered in his brightness, growing like Vishnu. The Supreme Lord Sri Damodar was bound with his devotee's love. I offer my humble obeisance.
Those super excellent pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna's baby drowned in the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy. The devotees who are attracted only to the majestic aspects of Narayana and Vaikuntha. The Lord here reveals, I am conquered and overwhelmed by pure loving devotion. To the Supreme Lord Damodar, my obeisances hundreds and hundreds of times.
O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for liberation nor eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other boon. My only prayer is that your childish pastimes may constantly appear in my mind. O Lord, I do not even want to know your futures, but
Well,
rather
I'll do.
simply wish that your childish pastimes will ever be connected in my heart.
Number 4, who is that?
O Lord, who keeps Mithra getting out, Lotus face, which is encircled by locks of golden hair, have become dead and like twinkles. Due to Mother Yashoda's kisses, what more can I describe in this? Millions of confidences are of no use to me, but may this vision constantly remain around my heart.
All unlimited Vishnu, O Master, O Lord, be pleased upon me and drown me in an ocean of sorrow, and almost like a dead man. Please shower the rain of mercy on me, uplift me and protect me with your nectarian peace.
O Lord Damodara, in your form, as baby Mother Yashoda bound you with grinding stone with rope for praying cows. You then freed the sons of Kubera, Manigriva, and Nalakavara, who were cursed to stand as trees, and you gave them the chance to become your devotees. Please bless me in the same way. I have no desire for liberation into your effulgence.
O Lord, the entire universe was created by Lord Brahma, who was born from your atonement. This was bound with rope by Mother Yashoda. To this rope I offer my humble obeisances. I offer my obeisances to your most beloved Radharani and to your humble servants. Shri Radharani.
He Jai. He Jai. Hare Krishna. Hare.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jasodanandana Brajajana Rajana Jasodanandana Brajajana Rajana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radhari Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Shindarodi Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you for playing. Thank you for coming. Hare Krishna. Okay. Today we'll be reading from, let's see, what does that board say? 10:41:31, I believe. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. So we'll be reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 41, verse 31. We'll be reading the Sanskrit word-for-word translation and no purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's disciples Ki Jai. Let's see. Is there any more light in here? Can you? That will require the fans on. Never mind. It's pretty dark in here. I'm not directly under any light, unfortunately. Uchu param aho gopyas tapakim archadam mahat yahi eta. I can't see that probably. I'm probably gonna need my phone. Give me a second. I can't see this. Pretty dark up here. Thank you. Uchu paro aho gopyas tapakim archadam mahat yahi etav anupashyanti Nanaloka Mahotsavo Uchu Paro Aho Gopyas Tapa Kim Achadam Mahat Yahi Etav Anupashyanti Naraloka Mahotsavo Uchu Paro Aho Gopyas Tapa Kim Achadam Mahat Yahi Etav Anupashyanti Naraloka Mahotsavo. Oh, thank you. Good idea. Ushupado aho gopyas tapakyam achadam mahat yahi etav anupashyanti naraloka mahotsavo. Achupado aho gopyas tapakyam achadam mahat yahi etav anupashyanti naraloka mahotsavo. Uchuhu said, Pauraha, the women of the city, Aho, Gopyaha. Oh, I still need. Maybe. This class is interesting already. Where was I? Okay. Gopyaha, that cowherd girls of Vrindavan. Tapaha, austerity. Kim, what? Acharan, have executed. Mahats, great. Yaha, who? He, indeed. Eta, these two. Anupashyanti, constantly see. Nadaloka, for human society. Maha Utsava, who are the greatest source of pleasure. Translation. The women of Mathura exclaimed, "Oh, what severe austerities the gopis must have performed to be able to regularly see Krishna and Balaram, who are the greatest source of pleasure." for all mankind. Om Agyan Samanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshumiletam Yena Tasma Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanshakapaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evascha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhattacharya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai. Thank you everyone for coming. Before we begin, I'd like to offer my, gratitude to everyone who's come, all the Vaishnavas here, but first and foremost, throughout my life, my brother, my mother and my brother, His Grace Jai Jagannath Prabhu, because it's very simple. If you want to build a tower, you need more than one person. In much the same way, if you want to build character, then we need more than one person to help us. There's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child, so in this way, it's every opportunity is opportunity to offer gratitude to so many people, but especially first and foremost my mother and my brother. So hopefully we'll discuss some things that's beneficial for myself especially, and for hopefully it can benefit others as well. So naturally I'd like to start off with a quote that kind of sets the mood for the class. So there's a nice quote. It says, "Work for a cause, not for applause. Live life to express, not to impress. Don't strive to make your presence known, just make your absence felt." And so with this mood, we could try to discuss some things about this topic today. And so there's a nice verse in this regard, because basically, when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he basically said two things. When devotees, when they're speaking about topics, especially about, like this verse today, it mentions the gopis perform austerity. So he made the significant point that when describing Krishna's pastimes, especially with the Radharani and the gopis, two factors should be considered. Is the speaker qualified? No. And the second factor is, are the audience qualified to hear? I don't know. Prabhu saying no, he's shaking his head. So there's a nice verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's from the first Canto, chapter 18, verse 23. It says, "As the birds fly in the sky, as far as their capacity allows, so do the learned devotees describe the Lord as far as their realization allows." So this verse is very significant of the quote I quoted recently, just now, is that we should never try to speak on subject matters just to try to impress others, because Krishna will humble us. He'll reveal what our true faith is. And so basically there's a verse that says, "Shraddhavan jana hoy bhakti adhikari uttama madhya kanisha shraddha anusari." So one's bhakti devotional service is according to one's faith, and faith is determines what type of faith you have, determines whether you're a kanishta adhikari, a beginning devotee, a madhyama adhikari, an intermediate devotee, and a uttama adhikari. Shastra yute suni pundrida shraddha yamra uttama adhikari se tadaye samsara. So this verse says, who's a uttama adhikari? Like Srila Prabhupada. That person who is expert, Shastra Yute, who's expert at Shastra, logic, and reasoning. And the most important factor, Dhrida Shraddha Yamra, who has unflinching faith, conviction that Krishna is in control. And what's the result of that? What is the result of that faith? Shastra Yute Sunipun Dhrida Shraddha Yamra Uttama Adhikari se Tade Ye Samsara. That person can deliver the whole world, like Srila Prabhupada. And so we should never put ourselves on a platform of Srila Prabhupada especially in the social media age. Prabhupada, yes, he has so many followers, but when did he get followers? We should ask ourselves that. When did he get followers? When he first met his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Now I'm going off of my notes because, but I'll hopefully I'll get back on track. But I'm just speaking what's kind of coming to mind. So when did Srila Prabhupada get followers? So the first time he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, his guru, in 1922. Srila Prabhupada was in his mid-20s. And at their first meeting, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, he asked Srila Prabhupada, who was known as Abhay Chadam, he says, "My dear Abhay Chadam," before he even knew his name, he says, "Bharta Bhumite Hola Manusha Jamaya Jamasata Kakari Kara Para Upakar." It is the duty of those born in India to preach Lord Chaitanya's message all over the world. So go to America and preach the glories of the Lord. And this is all before he even knew Srila Prabhupada's name. And so Srila Prabhupada was getting up, and he gave him this instruction. He was like, "Nice to meet you." He gave him a life instruction. And so in 1922, Srila Prabhupada was given this instruction when he was 25 or 26 years old. And when did Srila Prabhupada, when did he get views? When did he get subscribers? When did he get likes? Over 45 years later. So what does that indicate? That indicates that Srila Prabhupada's, his ruchi, his taste in Krishna consciousness did not come from Dhanam Janam Sundarim. Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vajaga Ishakamaye Mama Jamani Jamani Shore Bhavata Bhaktir Ahai Tukhi. We have to ask ourselves, does our Krishna consciousness come from views on YouTube, retweets, likes, followers, or does it come from actually Krishna consciousness? So the lesson we learn from Srila Prabhupada is that anyone can show what they're made of when everybody's watching. But the testament of our Krishna consciousness is to show what we're made of when nobody's watching. And so for 45 years, Srila Prabhupada, over 45 years, without experiencing any followers, Srila Prabhupada still maintained his enthusiasm. Now, we pray every day, or we're supposed to, after Mongol Artsy. Not that I have any realization since I haven't attended Mongol Artsy and God knows when. But generally here in Chicago, they used to say that, and I believe all over the world, they used to say the Shishashakam prayers. And in the Shishashakam prayers, this verse appears, Na Dinam, Na Janam, Na Sundarim. Lord Chaitanya says, Na Dinam, I do not want any followers. Dinam, I don't want unlimited wealth. Na Dinam, Na Janam, I don't want unlimited followers. And Sundarim, I don't want any, my happiness doesn't come from beautiful women or lust, beautiful men, opulence, etc. And so we pray every day. Na Janam, I don't want any followers. But generally speaking, what happens? When people don't follow us, they ignore us, they insult us, they criticize us, misjudge us. Well, look at what Srila Prabhupada did. He dealt with this for 45 years and still maintained it. So that's the indication that he's Sashtra Yute Suni Pundrida Shraddha Yamra. He has unflinching faith in Krishna. And his enthusiasm never died out. So that's a lesson we could take from Srila Prabhupada's life. And we should never put ourselves on the level of Srila Prabhupada. It doesn't matter how many followers we have on social media. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta, he makes a very interesting point in this regard. He says basically, as I was mentioning before, there are two factors in considering about speaking about the Bhagavatam in general, but specifically about, Krishna's pastime with Radha, the gopis, Rasa Leela, etc. So as I mentioned before, two factors to consider. Is the speaker qualified? No, as far as myself is concerned. And are the listeners qualified? Maybe, maybe not. However, hypothetically speaking, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta emphasizes this point. He says, even if for argument's sake, the speaker is qualified, but if the listeners are not qualified, then everyone is practically wasting their time. Why? Take a teacher, a calculus teacher, and he goes to a kindergarten class, and he's teaching calculus. What will the children understand? Absolutely nothing. So what's the point of speaking about Radha and Krishna and gopis if we're basically trying to get off the eating, sleeping, defending, and especially mating platform. So what will they understand about Christians? We'll equate that with some movie we saw of Leonardo DiCaprio and what's her face in Titanic. We'll equate it to that. And so in this way, you know, it'll be very superficial. Nobody makes an advancement, and so Sri Bhaktisiddhanta. So basically, he mentions. So this is a very interesting point to verify. So this is a pastime that appears that's mentioned in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta by Bhav, the biography of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, arduously, and we're all grateful to the in ISKCON, I'm sure, that Bhakti Vikas Swami has took many years to compile this, you know, biography of Bhaktisiddhanta, and so it's a nice point mentioning that in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta by Bhav, Volume 2. The chapter is called Further Contentious Issues. On page 195 and 196, it describes that during Bahulastami, just yesterday was Bahulastami, not the appearance of Radha Kumbh, but the reappearance of Radha Kumbh. And so it's described that in 1922, or during those years when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta took his disciples to Radha Kumbh. Naturally, when you're at Radha Kumbh and it's a Radhasami festival, especially, naturally the yogis, the swamis, the babajis, the renunciates, when they come to Radha Kumbh, who do they expect to hear about? Radha and the gopis, right? In their pastimes with Krishna. But it's described that some sahajiyas, you know, kind of insincere spiritualists, when they came to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's camp at Radha Kumbh, they were confused. It was like, what's going on? Why? Because he was speaking about the Upanishads, philosophy. He was neither speaking about Radha. Why? Because that's a lesson. If you speak calculus to kindergartens, then what will they receive? Not only that, it's also described in these pages that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he will also, at Radha Kumbh, he will also describe, and he will encourage his disciples to describe the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj, fundamental pastimes. Now, why the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj considered important more than discussing pastimes of Radharani and the gopis at Radha Kumbh? Well, it's very simple. In the Bhagavatam, in Canto 1, Chapter 2, Verse 13, it says, Atapum bir, dvija shrestar, vanashram vibhagashaha swanutitasa damasa samsidir haritoshana. It describes that we have our purpose in life, and it distinguishes from the purpose of life. Our purpose in life and the purpose of life. What is the distinction? It's very simple. Consider a blender, a computer, a vacuum cleaner. So they all have their individual purpose, right? But they all have a common purpose. And what's the common purpose? That unless they're plugged in to their power source, then they will not work. So it's described, Varnashram Vibhagashaha. We all have our material and external spiritual occupation. Brahmana, Satriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Brahmachari, Grihasta, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. So these are like the blender. They're like the computer. They're like the vacuum cleaner. But it says, what's the purpose of all these occupations? Samsidir Hari Toshana, to please Lord Hari. And when you please Lord Hari, he removes your obstacles in life. And so, so what does it mean to please Hari? Just like I said, a blender, a computer, a vacuum cleaner, they need to be connected to a power source. So in the Gita, chapter 10, verse 8, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravatete iti matuam bhajate mam buddha bhava samavitaha. He says, I am the power source of everything. Those who are truly wise connect to me. I was mentioning this before. And so what's the result of connecting to Krishna? Yasyasti bhatir bhagavatiya kenshana sarvagunis tatra samasatehu suraha. When you connect to Krishna, then what's the result? You develop good qualities, and these good qualities make a person attractive. Just like, why is a computer attractive? Why is a blender attractive? Why is a vacuum cleaner attractive? Because they're connected to a power source. So it's not that accepting the occupation of a brahmana, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, a Sudra, or even a brahmachari, a grihasta, a vanaprastha, saying these are not attractive. What makes us attractive is that when we're connected to Krishna, and what's the result of being connected to Krishna? Good qualities. And one does not develop qualities just by wearing clothes of a spiritualist. You have to actually connect to Krishna. And Krishna will test our faith. What's our true faith? And so in this regard, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he tells a nice story in this regard. He says, this story is called Yes, No, Very Good. So once upon a time, in India, in Bengal, there were some criminals and they committed a crime. However, they passed a villager and they framed this villager for the crime. And so when the police came, they arrested this villager and took him to the court of law. And so this villager, this Bengali villager, he was thinking, if I speak English, the judge will be impressed with me and he'll easily exonerate me. But unfortunately, this villager, he only knew 3 words in English: yes, no, and very good. And so the judge asked him, my dear sir, did you commit the crime? And so in order to press the judge with his little English he knew, he says, yes. So then the judge asked him, did anybody help you? He said, no. So then finally the judge says, do you know what you're saying? You'll go to life or prison. You'll go to prison for life. And he says, very good. So he was confused when the police was taking him to prison. He was like, what are you doing? And so Bhaktisiddhanta, he explains this story is that we may have information of the Bhagavatam, but the question is, do we have transformation from the Bhagavatam? So what does that mean? That means we see there's so many pastimes that anyone can be humble when you're honored. Try being humble when somebody else is honored. Anyone can be tolerant when you're respected. Try being tolerant when you're disrespected. Anyone can be happy when you're reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam. Try being happy when somebody else is reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is a lesson I could take from, first of all, well, I'll mention, I like to highlight many devotees, but Krishna Archana, you guys can't see her right now, but she's literally like laughing at everyone's jokes in every class. She never looks bored at all. So this is not to criticize anyone, because I myself, I have to, stay awake too, because naturally we all have this false ego. And false ego means, there's a saying, there's a quote, it says, 2 monologues do not make a dialogue. And that's most relationships. What does that mean? That means everyone loves to hear themselves speak. Why? Because we're entangled in the web of Maya. And so there's a book by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, it's called Vaishnava K. The translation is what kind of devotee are you? Are you a humble devotee? Or are you pretending to be a humble devotee? So basically he's describing the sticky situations we should avoid. Just like a fly, he should avoid a spider's web. And so in one of his commentaries, His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj, he wrote a commentary to this book by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Vaishnava K. And in that book, he says, just as a spider is never entangled in its web, so Krishna can never be entangled in the web of Maya. What does that mean? Entangled in the web of the most material nature. What does that mean? He's not entangled in lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, vengeance. And just as a spider, it says, now what's the indication that a person is entangled in Maya's web? It's very simple. They're unhappy, right? Just like when a fly is entangled in a spider's web, is he happy? No. So when we're entangled in Maya's web, in you could say Krishna's web, Daivihi yesha gunamayi mamamaya duratyaya mam eva ye prabhantite tam. What's that verse? I forgot. Karananidhi? Daivihiye shaguna mayi. Mam evaye prabantite. Tarantite, yeah. So Krishna says, Daivihiye shaguna mayi. This divine energy beyond, this divine web of mine. And it's very simple. How do you become free from this web? You follow his instructions. And so what is his instructions in chapter 14 of the Gita? Arjuna says, he asks Krishna, my dear Krishna, how can I become free from the modes of material nature? And what does that mean? How can I become free from the entanglement of this web? So what does Krishna tell Arjuna in chapter 14, verse 22 through 25? He says very simple, treat honor and dishonor the same, happiness and distress the same, friends and enemy the same, etc. The dualities, treat all the dualities as the same. Now, why does Krishna say that? Because it's very simple, that if our happiness is only dependent on being honored, then that means, let's say nobody ever honored us, nobody ever respected us, nobody ever glorified us. That means we will never be happy, and we'll always be entangled in Maya's web. What does that mean? Tangled in the web of envy, and anger, and vengeance, etc. So he says, treat these things as the same. Otherwise, you'll get yourself in a lot of trouble. So the problem is when we're dealing in a community of devotees, is that that's the tendency that, not in a community of devotees, but everywhere. The tendency is that, we all have our pride, we all have our envy. And what does that mean? That means we become very proud when people take our advice, and we become very envious when people take someone else's advice. And so, in the Gita, Arjuna approached Krishna. He approached Krishna, and they were just discussing the contents of the Bhagavad Gita. And Arjuna, he put himself on the same level of Krishna. He says, my dear Krishna, if I kill my relatives, then I will be entangled in the web of karma. Now Krishna, in the Gita, chapter 7, verse 26, Krishna says, Vedaham samatitani vartamanani sha arjuna bhavishani chabutani mamtu vedana kashana. Krishna says, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything, past, present, and future, but me no one knows. So when Arjuna, a living entity, was arguing with Krishna, Krishna could have said, Arjuna, shut up, I'm God. What does that mean? That means I know everything, so stop arguing with me. No, Krishna never did that. He basically, and this is the lesson we could take, so God, Krishna, he knows everything, but he acts like he doesn't know anything. Therefore, he doesn't shove his advice down people's throat. Now, we don't know anything, but we act like we know everything, so we shove our advice down people's throats. So Krishna never shoved his advice down Arjuna's throat. Why? Because there's no love if you shove things. I want you to do this. So Krishna says, do what you wish to do. What do we say? I want you to do what I want you to do. And so, but if that's the case, that means there will be no love. And if there's no love, then what's the point of the relationship? That means it's not a loving relationship, it's slavery. And so therefore Krishna, he waited for Arjuna to come to the conclusion that yes, Krishna, I'm so entangled in Maya's web. I have no idea what decision I should make. Please instruct me. So therefore in chapter 10 of the Gita, Arjuna says, he tells Krishna, my dear Krishna, Padam Brahma, Padam Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavam Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adi Deva Majavibhum Ahustam Rishaya Sarve Devashir Nardistata Asito Devalovya Swayam Chaiva Bravishime. He says, Krishna, Padam Brahma, you are the Supreme Spirit. Padadhamma, you are the supreme abode, the supreme shelter. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, you are Pavitram, pure, even when you dance with a lot of women, the gopis, you are not contaminated by the web of lust. What happens in the material world when a guy gets entangled in the web of lust? He gets in so many situations, sticky situations, just like a web. And what does that mean? That means he has to pay child support, alimony. He has to hope his wife doesn't kill him for having an affair. So many sticky situations. But no, Krishna, he's Pavitram. he is free from Maya's web. He is free from this lust, and therefore he can never be in any sticky situation. Divyam, you are Divyam, you are transcendental to Maya's web. So pretty much this whole verse just describes that, my dear Krishna, I have faith in your words. Why? Because I can understand that you are free from Maya's web. You're not entangled in the ego. I feel your love. I feel your compassion. And so this is a lesson we could take, that Krishna did not force his will on Arjuna. So there's a saying, it says, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Now, the problem with this is that Krishna has not descended from the spiritual world to instruct us. So what's the lesson? The lesson is that we all, I mean, it's a natural process. We all accept some advice, some mentorship, a guru, shiksha guru, diksha guru, mentor. And what do we tell them? We say, yes, you can free me from my entanglement in Maya to some greater or lesser degree. The problem is that when we're dealing with a community of so many devotees, the tendency is that we see in so many pastimes that the tendency is that there's many pastimes, but if I had to focus on a pastime, next week is Govardhan Lila, Govardhan Puja pastime. And so in this pastime, briefly to describe this point, it's described that the Brajavasidis, the residents in Vrindavan, they were worshiping Indra. Why? Because they were offering gratitude to Indra. Yes, we're offering our yagi, our sacrifice to Indra because he's providing rain. And so they took the advice of Indra. So we could understand that, yes, in a community, we take advice from so many people. Why? Because we say, yes, your advice is very valuable. You can free me from the entanglement in so many things, the entangle in my karma, the entangle in my anger, my lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, vengeance, etc. And so they took the advice of Indra. However, we should know for certain that Krishna, he is Ishvara Parama Krishna. He is Ishvara Sarvabhutana Hridesha Arjuna Tishati. He is situated within the heart of everyone. So, and what does that mean? That means he's the true judge. He can determine who is actually proud and who is actually humble. Just like in the Putana pastime, all the residents of Vrindavan, they said, my dear Putana, you are a great Vaishnava. Why? Because you're beautiful. So she was an angel on the outside, but she was actually proven to be a demon on the inside. But the residents of Vrindavan cannot understand it. Why? Because they're not Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridesha Arjuna Tishati. They're not situated within the heart of everyone. And they're not Vedaham Samatitani Vartamanani Shar Arjuna Bhavishani Chabhutani Mamsu Vedana Kashana. They do not know past, present, and future. So Krishna knows that we'll be a jerk even before we'll be a jerk, even before we knew we'll be a jerk. So he knows past, present, and future. And not only that, he's situated within the heart of everyone, so he could judge. Not only that, it's described in the 6th canto, chapter 14, verse 1 of the Bhagavatam, it's described that although Vitrasura, he was a demon on the outside, but he was a humble devotee on the inside. So this is the lesson we could take, that the lesson in all spiritual teachings. Never judge a book by its cover, because you may miss out on a good story in Vitrasura's case, or a bad story in Putana's case. But the reality is that everyone has a good story. Why? Because everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna. Vidya vinaya sampane brahmine gavi hasini shune cheva swapake cha pandita samardarshina. Krishna says in the Gita, chapter 5, verse 18, he says that a pandit, a truly wise person, he sees that everyone has a good story. Why? Because everyone is a part and parcel of them, but they're covered by various designations, various bodies, various designations. And now, why can't we see the greatness within others? Because Krishna explains that in chapter 15, Mamaivamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manashishtani indriyani prakististani karshati. He says, Mamaivamsho, amsho, everyone is a part of me. So that means everyone has a good story. But why can't we see this great story? Because manashishtani indriyani prakritistani karshati. We're covered by the disease of the mind and senses. Just like there's a saying, hate the sin, not the sinner. Hate the disease, not the diseased. Just like if you go to the hospital and your friend is suffering from a terminal illness, you never say they're cancer. You say rather, they have cancer. In much the same way, great pundit Vaishnavas in the scriptures, I'll mention Prahlad in a second, but he also says the same thing. Great pundits, they never say, oh, my father, people like Hiranyakashipu, they're not proud, they're not envious, they're not vengeful. They have a disease called pride, called envy, called vengeance. So they distinguish the person from the disease, tongue twister, the disease, the disease that's enslaving this person. So therefore, they're never disturbed. So in this way, the lesson we could take is that we're all meant to become PhDs. What does that mean? Pretty humble devotees. Just like when you go to the hospital, you see that when especially a child, when a child goes to the hospital, maybe Mother Pooja probably knows this the best, and currently, at least recently, since her son is 7 years old, that when a child goes to the hospital, what does he do? When he has to get a shot, or anything, even when he sees the hospital, he's like screaming. The mother has to drag him out the car. So he goes into the hospital, he's screaming at the doctors. He's kicking the doctor. He's, insulting the doctor. He's doing so many things, so many vulgar things to the doctor. But have you ever seen a doctor retaliate against his patient? No. Why? Because I can understand, yes, this child, or let's say a mental institution, especially at a mental institution, that they can understand that their patients, they have a disease of the mind. When you have the disease of the mind or a disease of the body, you may do so many things. You may or may not know that the doctor is helping you, but the point is that the doctor will never take anything personally, because he distinguishes between a healthy person and a diseased person. When we're diseased, we do so many things. So this is the understanding we learn from the Gita, and even from the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. So this verse describes the gopis' austerities, but as I was mentioning at Radha Kund, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta mostly focused on the Upanishads and the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. So even Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, chapter 5, verse 12, Prahlad Maharaj says, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with the living entity for his devotional service, that person becomes a pundit, a wise person. And he does not make distinctions. So what's the result of becoming a pundit? So Maharaj says, that person does not make any distinctions between friends, enemies, and himself. He thinks we are all eternal servants of the Lord. Jiveta Sarup Hoy Krishneta Nitya Das, Krishneta Tatasta Shakti, Beta Abe Prakash. We're all Krishna Das, eternal servants of Krishna, but because we are the Tatasta Shakti, what does that mean? Tatasta Shakti means the border. Just like a doorway, there's inside the door and outside the door. But the border between the doors is called the threshold. So we're stuck between the threshold of Maya. What does that mean? Just like everyone's seen many movies, many TVs, what does that mean? That means we have our good nature here and we have our bad nature, the devil and the angel, right? So we're the Tatasta Shakti. We're stuck between the middle. What does that mean? That our good nature gives us advice and our bad nature gives us advice. So Prahlad Maharaj says that a wise person, he does not make any distinctions between friends, enemies, and himself, because he can understand that we're the eternal servant of Krishna, but we're all the Tatasta Shakti. Because we're stuck between the spiritual and the material energy, that means sometimes we can become diseased by Maya. And so therefore, he never takes offense to anyone's criticism, retaliation, etc. So this is the humility that we could learn. And so there's also a verse that we often hear that's similar to the Jiveta Sarup Hoy Krishneta Nitya Das verse. We're all eternal servants of Krishna. So there's a famous verse, and it mentions the gopis. Gopi Bartu Kamalayor Dasa Dasa Anudas. What does this mean? It means that our identity is, I'm the eternal servant of the 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 gopis. So that's what we generally say. However, Christian will really test your faith to see if you truly believe that, right? If you really believe that I'm the humble servant of the servant of the servant of the gopis. So as I was mentioning before, anyone can be humble when they're honored. Try being humble when someone else is honored. And so we see this in the Govardhan Leela. Get back to that point. Indra, he was happy when he was honored. People says, yes, Indra, you are our God. Your advice is very valuable. And so one day, the servant of Indra, he came to Indra. He says, my dear Indra, the Brajavasis, the residents of Vrindavan, they're not taking your advice anymore. They stop offering Indra Yagya. So Indra says, what's the problem? Who gave him such advice to stop offering me Yagya? So his servant says, a 7-year-old. Christian was 7 years old. Now that's a really blow to the ego when you're considered, now Indra, he performed so many yagyas to take the position of Indra, 100 horse yagyas. Now it's a very blows to the ego when somebody tells you that, like Mother Puja, her son is 7 years old. Now that'd be a blow to my ego if they go to him for Mridanga lessons and not me. We have a better teacher than you. So who is he? Who is his great? He's a 7-year-old. So this is precisely what the servant of Indra told Indra. He says, they're taking advice of a 7-year-old. So Indra is described because he was covered by Krishna's Yoga Maya. He cannot understand that, yes, this 7-year-old, he's actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so this is a lesson we could take in our own lives, is that he's in control of, he's in control of, how do I translate this to modern terms? He's in control of our views, our subscribers, our likes, our retweets. We're not in control of it. So sometimes there's a saying, it says, life is like a trumpet. If you don't put anything into it, then you don't get anything out of it. So there's also a similar quote. It says, in life, you get what you work, you don't get what you wish for, you get what you work for. So Indra, he worked for the position of Indra. And how did he get that position? He performed 100 horse sacrifices. Now, we can understand from the Gita that just because we perform more austerities, this verse mentions austerities, just because we perform more austerities than this other, what kind of austerities do we perform generally? We perform austerities like chanting the holy name, like Haridasa Kaur, 300,000 names. We perform so many Ekadashis. We read the scriptures. We memorize them. That's an austerity. So many austerities. We bathe in the holy rivers. But this does not mean we will get more fame than others. And we could see this. So Indra was thinking, he was thinking, I performed 100 horse sacrifices to get the position of Indra, and they're taking the advice of a 7-year-old. What horse sacrifices did he perform? So what does that mean? That means Krishna, he's in control of our fame and our infamy. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya says, Nadanam najanam nasundarim kavitam vajaga isha kamaye mama jamani jamanishore bhavata bhatira haitsukiya tswai. That a wise person, he becomes free. If he's truly wise, he's detached from this this desire for followers. Why? Because to the degree we have some followers, yes, we become proud, but even worse, to the degree somebody else has followers, we become envious. And what happens when you become envious? You're willing to do so many demoniac and sinful activities. I'll give an example from modern day. Let me see, what's the time? In the early 90s, there was two figure skaters. I think their names were Tanya Harding and, does anybody remember the other one? Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan. So Nancy Kerrigan was the good skater, the good person, and Tanya Harding was the envious person. So she basically, Tanya Harding hired someone to break the legs of Nancy Kerrigan, just so she'll win the gold medal at the Olympics. And she almost succeeded. She hired someone, they literally almost broke her legs, but she was She was too injured to compete at that Olympics. Something you could look it up. But this is precisely the lesson we take from Indra, that to the degree we become envious, then we'll perform so many sinful activities against others. So Indra, because he was envious of a 7-year-old, he literally summoned the summer, what is this called? What are those clouds called? The summer Vartaka clouds or something like that? He summoned some clouds to pour rain and thunder. It's described that the rain was the size of pillars. And he told this personified rain, this personified clouds, this personified thunder to kill all the residents of Vrindavan. Why? Simply because he was envious of a 7-year-old. So basically, it's described throughout the Bhagavatam and all universal spiritual teachings how we can remain peaceful. There's a saying. It says, your life will become a masterpiece when you learn to master peace. And so it basically says, we can understand from this pastime and the lessons of Bhagavatam that there are two things in this world. Things inside our control and things outside our control. Inside our control is giving advice to others. Outside our control is others taking our advice. So we see that Indra, because he focused on things outside his control. What was outside his control? They no longer took his advice, the resident of Vrindavan, they took the advice of Krishna. And so there's a saying, it says, happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control and some things are not. It is only after you have faced up to this fundamental rule and learned to distinguish between what you can and can't control that inner tranquility and outer effectiveness become possible. Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shant Bhuti Muti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashant. So Lord Chaitanya, he says that a Krishna Bhakta, he is always shant, peaceful, because he is nishkama. He has no desire that others take his advice. Yeah, naturally as a community, yeah, we want to help others, but the reality is that that's that person's choice to take our advice, not our choice to force our advice to others. If we, to the degree we do that, then we'll be ashant. Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shant Bhuti Muti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashant. We'll become very disturbed in mind and body and words, and therefore will cause harm to others and someone else. So there's a couple more points I'll mention in this regard, hopefully. Is that so this verse talks about the gopis' austerities, but the reality is that when you use the word austerities with the word gopis, it's practically like a contradiction. Why? Because when there's prema, love, nothing is austerity. Even when there's lust, Hare Krishna. Even when there's lust, nothing is an austerity. Govamanko Thakur. It's described that he was so lusty. One day, a brahmana, he slept with a prostitute one day. And then after he went about his business, he performed the funeral rites for his father. He couldn't stop thinking about the prostitute. So it's described that there was like a thunderstorm that night, a tornado, a hurricane, a volcano. But he was like, piece of cake. He went through this storm and he went to the prostitute's house and he says, my dear prostitute, can we unite again? And so she told him that, my dear Prabhu, if you go to Vrindavan, you'll actually be satisfied. So the lesson is that when there's love, or even when there's lust, nothing is considered an austerity. We could do anything. So the gopis, when they had such love for Krishna, it's described that they were even willing to go to hell for Krishna. So nothing is an austerities. But for us, so there's one last point I'll mention, because obviously the class is a little bit shorter today with the Dhamma Darashana prayers. So we have to shorten the class more than normal. But so as far as austerity is concerned, in the Bhagavatam, the last point is that the Bhagavatam describes that there are two kinds of devotees: those who are sincere and those who are severe. What does sincere mean? It means that those who perform the austerity of respecting others. What is someone who's practiced severe austerities? So basically there's two types of people: those who perform the austerity of respecting others, and those who perform austerities to be respected by others. Now look at Prahlad. He performed the austerity of respecting others. His father threw him over a mountain, put him under the feet of elephants, tried to make him into a pakora, tried to make him into some subji. So in this way, but still, Prahlad, he says, my dear father, I wish you well. So what does that mean? That's the austerity of respecting others. Now, Hiranyakashipu was described that he performed austerities to be respected by others. What austerities did he perform to become so powerful? He buried himself in the ground. He stood on his tippy toes for thousands of years. His name, he fasted from food and water for thousands of years. His name means, Hiranyakashipu means one who loves money and women. But he was willing to give that up for thousands of years. Why? Just to be respected by others. So he told Prahlad, my dear Prahlad, I would rather stand on my tippy toes for thousands of years. I would rather give up all food and water for thousands of years. I would rather give up money, lust, pornography for thousands of years than to tolerate and respect you. And so what does this mean? The lesson we could take from this is that although Hiranyakashipu was powerful on the outside, but because he wasn't powerful on the inside, he didn't perform the austerity of simply respecting others. It was an easy austerity. My dear Prahlad, I know you don't consider me God. I know your kindergarten classmates are taking your advice more than me. Because that was an easy austerity compared to what he did, but because he didn't perform that austerity respecting other, then it led to his degradation. And so therefore, here's the last point. In the Bahujama Kade Yadi Shravanam Kirtan Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Primadam. This is the same lesson we learned from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Adi Lila chapter 8, verse 16. It says that even if you perform the ego-producing austerity of chanting 300,000 names of the holy name, like Haridas Thakur, if you don't perform the humility-producing austerity of offering all respect to others without expecting respect in return, then what leads to your degradation? And in that purport, Prabhupada says, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says that one should strictly follow Lord Chaitanya verse of Trinada Pisuni Chaina. And so this is the lesson we could take in our own lives, is that we have our festival of holy name. And at the festival of holy name, generally what do we do? Yes, we chant 32 rounds, 64 rounds, 108 rounds. But ask anyone to come to the festival of forgiving others, the festival of appreciating others, the festival of, just not criticizing others. Will we come to that festival? So that's a question you could judge for yourself. So, but the lesson we could take from the Bhagavatam and from these teachings is that how long can we chant the holy name when we hate others? Not very long. Eventually, it'll be definitely inattentive rounds, and eventually from our offenses, then we eventually give up the holy name and go back to, the material world. So anyways, I guess that's the class today. I tried my best. I would like, my mother told me not to mention this, but I didn't have much time to prepare. This is the disclaimer. Because I perform the austerity, the most difficult austerity of washing pots every day. But it's not the austerity because at least they pay me for it. So I couldn't do the austerity for devotional service. So anyways, that's our topic for today. We have 5 minutes. Does anyone want to offer any criticism? That was pretty random class, so I tried my best. So.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Can you turn it down a little bit? Oh, yes.
Thank you for nice quotation with different slokas and very appreciative. And can you please read what is the translation of this sloka?
Today's verse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
31.
The women of Mathura exclaimed, "Oh, what severe austerities the gopis must have performed to be able to regularly see Krishna and Balaram, who are the greatest source of pleasure for all mankind." Did you want to comment on this verse?
All right. So the thing is that Krishna, because here it has been described how gopis, the women of Mathura city, they are praising gopis. Because how gopis are so fortunate that they are able to see Krishna every day. And that means we can see here, actually women are in nature, they are very envious of others. In general case, not for devotee, those who are non-devotees, women of specifically women of non-devotee section, you find that they are very jealous. Oh, she is wearing this dress, I should wear. Or they have natural tendency. But you can see here how women in Mathura city, of course, they had not seen Krishna. Now first time they are seeing. And they are praising, they are glorifying gopis, same kind of women that who are constantly watching Krishna. And Krishna also, another point it has been given in this also this sloka, that how Krishna is the object of love. So that means how you can, even if you constantly see Krishna for many times, even if you chant holy name of Lord constantly, you will never feel tired.
Yeah.
And even if you constantly watch Lord Krishna's lotus face, you will never be tired. So that's what I want to say. Okay, if you want to throw something, because time is out.
I appreciate that. But the only point I would agree and disagree with you is that in this material world, the Bhagavatam describes the second verse that everyone is entangled in a web of envy near Matsarana. It has nothing to do with being a woman, a man, even a monkey. We see, in the Christians' pastimes, even other species of life, they were envious. Just like, the difference between animals and humans is that when one group of animal, let's say hyenas, have some food, the lions become envious. But their envy is a necessity. Our envy is over what? Subscribers, money, views. So actually, animals are following the laws of nature. We're completely breaking the laws of nature. And so it has nothing to do with being a woman or a man. Everyone in this material world is envious, regardless of. In the Bible it says, "For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." My dear brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of you were a noble birth. But God chose the foolish people of the world to shame the wise. He chose the weak people of the world to shame the strong. Why? Just so no one may boast before him. And this is the lesson we learn from the Brahmanas and the wise of the Brahmanas' pastimes. The Brahmanas had information of the Bhagavatam, but the wise of the Brahmanas, they had transformation from the Bhagavatam. The cowherd boys went to the Brahmanas. "My dear Brahmanas, we are so hungry. Can you please feed us?" They just ignored the cowherd boys. So Krishna says, yes, they have information of the Bhagavatam, but go to the wise of the Brahmanas. They have transformation from the Bhagavatam. So the Brahmanas, what's the lesson we could take? The Brahmanas, they could give speeches composed of thousands of words, but because they could not practice one word, humility, compassion, then Krishna says, you are not an authority on the Bhagavatam. The wise of the Brahmanas are an authority on the Bhagavatam. So therefore, Lord Buddha says, he says, even though a speech may be 1,000 words, but made up of senseless words, one word of sense is better, which if a man hears, he becomes quiet, peaceful, and humble. So it's actually described in this pastime that the Brahmanas, they went to their wives and they says, you are our gurus. You are our teachers because we have information of the Bhagavatam, but you have the transformation. Not only that, it's described that the wives of the Brahmanas, they went to go see Krishna. But the Brahmanas, the husband, they stayed back at home. Why? Because they were fearful of the governor. Who's the governor? Canto. That's like somebody saying, no, don't go see Krishna. Adolf Hitler and the Gestapo. They're outside. Do not go to see them. But the wives of the Brahmana, I don't care if it's Adolf Hitler, I don't care if it's Canto, Mussolini, I'm going to see Krishna. Why? Because there's prema. Primanjana Chudita Bhati Viloshanena Santa Siddhaiva Hridayesha Vilokayanti Yam Shama Siddhanama Chinta Gudun Sarupam Govindam Adi Purusha Tamahamad. When there's prema, Krishna can empower anyone. So you may be a man, but that does not mean you will get Krishna's mercy. And you may be a woman, and that does not mean you will not get Krishna's mercy. Kali Kaleta Dharma Krishna Nama Sankirtan, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahe Tara Pravatana. Krishna could give his Shakti to anyone, even to women, even to children. So therefore, Lord Buddha says, even to children like Prahlad Maharaj. So therefore, Buddha says, he says, a man is not called an elder merely because his head is gray. His age may be ripe, but he is called old in vain. He in whom there is truth, virtue, love, restraint. He who is free from impurity and is wise, he is called an elder. And this is precisely with Srila Prabhupada. There's many verses that mention this, but Prabhupada mentions this in a verse from the Bhagavatam. I have it right here, surprisingly. From the first Canto, chapter 19, verse 26. He describes Shukadeva Goswami. He was 16 years old, but he was the Bhagavatam speaker. But he was basically making a point that one is not considered an elder just because you're older. You may be older in age, but elder means what are the choices we make in life. So Prabhupada mentions in his first Canto, chapter 19, verse 26. He says, a person is honored for his achievements and not for advanced age. A person can be older by experience and not by age. Sri Shukadeva Goswami, who is described herein as the son of Vyasadeva, was by his knowledge more experienced than all the sages present there, although he was only 16 years old. Now, last point, all the sages in Shukadeva Goswami, they were all elders. Why? Because neither was Shukadeva proud, oh, I'm the Bhagavatam speaker, and I'm superior to all you elder people. No, Shukadeva was neither proud, nor were the speakers of the Bhagavatam envious. And so they were all elders in this assembly, so that's the problem we have in our community. Pride, I'm better than people because I'm a man, because I'm rich, because I'm a Brahmana, because I know things. So that's the problem. And envy, when we don't have these things, when we're not a Brahmana, when we don't have riches, we become envious. So that's the problem in our life. So the last point I would like to mention is Kiba Vipra Kibi Nasi Suja Kene Noy Jai Krishna Tapa Veta Se Guru Hoy. Anyone can be, it says guru, but guru can mean Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru, mentor, teacher. Of course, this word guru has a tinge of pride hovering over it, but anyone can be a mentor. All you have to do is plug into Krishna. Just like if you plug your computer into his power source, then you can communicate with others. If it's not plugged in, you cannot communicate with others. So if we're plugged into Krishna consciousness, we could communicate with others. Why? Because we're humble, we're appreciative and forgiving. If we don't plug into Krishna, then we say so many things that have caused so many divisions in our community. Because we may think, oh yes, I'm a man, I'm rich, I'm a Brahmana, I'm this, I'm this. Sarvapani Vidam Mutam Tapadatwena Nirmalam Hishikena Hishikesha Savanam Bhatir Uchate. Pure bhakti comes when we give up all this sarva upadis, all these temporary designations that I'm a man. Yes, you're a man now, but what was you in your previous life? A woman. Similarly, just because you're a Brahmana, the wise man of society, that does not mean people will treat you like a Brahmana. That's why Durvasa Muni was envious of Ambarish. I'm a Brahmana. People should come to me for wisdom. But they were going to a rich king, Ambarish, for wisdom. So just because you're a Brahmana, this does not mean you'll be treated like a Brahmana. So therefore, what's the solution? Orba Bahu Kari Koha Shuna Sarva Loka Nama Suchi Ganti Pada Kanta Eshloka Srinada Pisuni Chena Tsaror Iva Sahishnuna Amani Namana Dena Kirtaniya Sadahari. One should string Lord Chaitanya's verse of humility around the thread of the holy name and wear around one's neck for continuous remembrance in order to keep ourselves out of a lot of trouble. So that's our class today. Thank you, everyone. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.